Welcome to another episode of the Glasgow Business Game Plan. And on this episode, we are having a great discussion with Gavin Mochan from Jobs and Care. Gavin, welcome.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I really appreciate you inviting me along.
I'm looking forward to the conversation. Now, Gavin, let's just dive in and tell us a bit more about yourself and Jobs and Care.
So, Jobs and Care is an online recruitment marketplace tailored for the social care sector. We connect employers and job seekers seamlessly to try and tackle the critical recruitment and retention crisis head on. To give you some context on that, Stephen, roughly 18% of all the UK job vacancies are in social care, and many of them go unfilled. And of course, that has a dramatic impact on frontline care. And when we started the business, our view, and certainly my view, was traditional job boards often fell short. In fact, fewer than 10% of the jobs listed on a traditional job board are actually promoted by that company in any way, certainly not beyond their own platform. And for me, that resulted in a lot of wastage around recruitment spend. And ultimately, customers then had the need for multiple suppliers to get the job done. What we do differently here at Jobs and Care is we prioritise both the customer and the job seeker. Every single listing on the site gets a dedicated campaign, reaching not only our on-site audience, but also going into the wider market to actively pursue individuals, whether they are actively looking for a job or not. Our targeted campaigns focus on the exact persona for each role, leading to higher quality hires. We also look to streamline hiring processes with features like built-in reference checkers for faster cycles. Really, in a nutshell, our goal is quite simple. We want to deliver fast, quality hires, and we're so confident in our approach that we actually introduced a social care guarantee, which underwrites a certain level of performance.
That's brilliant, and such a great thing to add into your marketing and your customer offer as well, is having that guarantee in there. You've got a real depth of knowledge in the sector and the requirement and some of the challenges they've got coming up against that, Gavin. But what's made you take that leap from the corporate background and recruitment that you've come from, to setting this up for yourself? What was there something that happened there that just made you think this is the route for me?
It's a good question. So all of my working life has been in the recruitment technology space. I started with a company called Monster back in the year 2000.
Sure.
Initially in sales before moving into management. And considering the industry only started in 1994, I've been around since the start of it, so I'm a bit of a dinosaur. But there was really three things that influenced my decision into starting Jobs and Care. I'd been running job board businesses for the last 20 odd years and knew in my heart of hearts that it became broken. I think Pareto's law was in effect, that maybe 20% of the customers got a great result. Those 20% of customers, normally really large, well-known brands, were soaking up 80% of the result. And ultimately what that meant is most customers were actually more dissatisfied than happy. So that was an influencing factor to say, right, the model was great back then. What does the model need to be in the future? It started to get me to ask the right questions. The other factors were recruitment and social care. I felt was failing, but it was growing at the same time. That's not a good combination, due to the increasing number of people needing care. And it wasn't just because the population are getting older. I think that's well publicised. But the fastest growing segment of people needing care are actually in the working age. And I also felt that the sector was not being served well by the existing supplier base. And with all these things, there's always personal factors as well. I've got a lot of affinity for the sector. My mum and in fact wider family were involved in care. In fact, my gran as well, who's sadly suffered from dementia, lived with us to her end of life. So I've got from that perspective, quite a bit of understanding of the sector, and it's something that I wanted to participate in terms of solving some of the well-documented challenges.
And it's really interesting that, because I think things working in social care is a vocation. It definitely takes a certain type of person to be able to to support people when they're at their most vulnerable as well.
Yeah.
And I suppose from that perspective, when they've got all those things going on, and because it's quite a selfless act or role that they do, sometimes looking after themselves to put themselves in the right position where they can have the biggest impact isn't at the forefront of their thoughts. So I think what you're proposing here with jobs and care is it's something that allows these people to explore their career and make the biggest impact as well.
Well, this is it. And some people say that care work is a vocation, and of course, to some degree, that's absolutely true. However, I think more needs to be done, not just from a supplier's perspective, but governmentally, socially, and in a lot of ways, need to change if this crisis is going to be solved. I mean, every single indicator that I looked at meant that if we're describing it as a crisis now, then we're looking at a catastrophe in the future because the what I've learnt from working with customers before a launch was actually that the whole system is supported by 4 million unpaid carers. And if the system stays the same way it is, in 10 years' time, we're going to need over 8 million unpaid carers to support that growing issue. And of course, that's unlikely to happen given the demographics and the growth. And there's going to be fewer people in that sort of 30 to 60 age bracket to look after mum and dad. So it's not without its challenge. So more is going to have to be done, not for people to just simply decide that it's a vocational calling. We're going to have to go to market and as an industry and influence people into what is a really rewarding career. And absolutely, it's got its drawbacks. And I think everybody would agree that in a lot of ways it's underpaid. But I think that's something that will change in the future because it will have to. And of course, I'm sure AI might come up in the conversation. If AI augments things and makes things more efficient, then hopefully that'll lead to more people taking a more people-centric, active role in their communities in the future, and hopefully they'll be better rewarded for it.
I mean, it's a huge challenge as you've outlined there for everyone. So on the theme of challenges, then you've stepped away from what you've known for years and years. Not stepped away from it, but you've now decided that I'm going to set myself up, and that brings different challenges for you as an individual. So how did you prepare yourself for getting set up and getting jobs and care into place?
Well, in terms of preparing myself, I think for me it's taking all of the learnings. I'm a big believer that you can't lie on your past successes. I'm a big believer that as individuals and as companies or whatever, 70% of the value that they create lies in the future. And my thinking was really, really simple. I've been in this industry for 24 years. I've really enjoyed it, but how could I take all of those learnings, all of that experience, and harness it into my future and the business future and the purpose behind what I do on a daily basis? And that was really a contributing factor. But really, I'm trying to leverage everything that I know about the industry, about my competencies in terms of finding people online, technology, and bringing all that together to create better outcomes.
Okay, and but now you're tapping into an element which is potentially new ground for you, which is that not just where your skill set lies, but then in becoming a business owner separate to that as well. And how are you finding that journey alongside obviously getting the jobs and care established in the marketplace as well?
Yeah. Well, I suppose how am I finding it? Then, of course, it's about certainly my expectation and reality are two different things. Of course, when you decide to start your own business, you need to have some sort of degree of personal confidence, don't you, that you can create some sort of value. Otherwise, you'd be a
Yeah.
bit foolish to go and build a business. And however big or great that individual contribution can be, the reality is you won't go very far without the expertise and efforts of others. You know, I started this business with that 24 years of experience, but I can only claim to be an expert at a handful of things. You know, what I've learned is perhaps what I don't know. I'm not an expert in social care. I'm pretty good at finding people online and getting them to apply to jobs for sure. But so much of my learning about the industries actually came from running pre-launch labs, which was engaging with customers, making sure that our product was right for market. But I learned directly from the industry itself, and that's been fantastic for me. Also, things like fundraising is
Mhm.
pretty new to me too. I think if you start any company, there's going to be certain elements that are brand new to you. I've always directly worked for large enterprises where fundraising wasn't a key part of the role. So I think the key learn for me is to stand on the shoulders of others, get that coach, beg, borrow, and ask for the help of others, and in the end, you'll get to the right destination faster.
The thing that really stood out for me there, Gavin, was your market research, which I think a lot of times is a step that's missed at the
Yeah.
start of a business, and then people end up peddling and maybe sort of pushing themselves down an avenue which wasn't initially the greater plan. So I really like that idea that you've done with the working labs and taking your own experience from the industry and seeing how it works and kind of putting them together to say, okay, this is the niche that we now set into. Where did that inspiration come from? Because it might be, it's one of these things. It's a widely known tool, but it's only widely known if everybody applies it as well. So
Yeah.
it's a really interesting step that you took.
Yeah. For me, I, I look, I mean, I think the older you get, the more experienced as a leader you are, the more conscious you become and the more self-aware of what you don't know. But I also think that you learn that if you're going to do something right, you need to do it in a really authentic way. And I think if I went out to the social care sector and said, hey, I'm a social care expert, I know the industry better than anybody else, um, I don't think that would have been true. And ultimately, I would have been found out. But one of the few skills I do possess is this idea of learnability. I love learning, I'm inquisitive. And well, I love to read books. I think sometimes one of the best ways to learn is to engage with people. So instinctively within me, that was quite natural as a process. And then of course there's also a business outcome in mind, as with any tasks and activities that you do. Ultimately, what I hoped was if people liked what I was doing and they were influencing it, that potentially they could become first customers, and that's always needed for any business because no matter who you are, year one is often about making the cash register ring. And yeah, that's a great for me. It was just a good way of accomplishing a lot of things in one setting.
And I love what you said there about, that almost that desire to learn more as you go. And you can see over your shoulder there, you've got a collection of books on the shelf there. Have you got a book there that's maybe helped you through the startup process, or as you've went on, or have you got a favorite that's on the shelf there that you refer to quite a bit?
It's a fantastic question, but one of the maybe not a favorite, but certainly one of the books I did read was Building a Story Brand. And I do apologize because I forget the author. And for me, that was really critically important, especially in the early days where people don't know your business, they don't know what it's about. And I think story is a fantastic way to put a lot of things across in a really succinct manner that people are interested in listening to, because we're hardwired from a very young age to listen to story. It's a great way of passing knowledge on, wisdom, and everything else that comes with it. So building a story brand and really reminding myself to tell that story. And uh, what surprised me most is people are interested in hearing that. Big part of the reason why I created Jobs in Care also maybe I didn't touch on that maybe I should be a bit more open about is I lost my mum sadly to cancer last year. And if you're like me, I'm sure I'm like everybody else, everybody wants to do their parents proud. Um, and I know it's a post-death situation, but ultimately I still want to do my mother proud. And that as much influence as anything else that I've mentioned before. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and do you know the thing there that you're tying in is that the stories connect emotionally. That's where
Yeah.
people, they then invest into what you're doing and why you're doing it. But having that intrinsic motivation, which, with in the memory of your mum, is
Mm,
what's driving you forward to do the best that you can.
yeah.
So I suppose from that perspective, then what does the best look like from you, Gavin? Is it in terms of, I know that you're from your experience, you're going to have a great interactive site that's going to be easy to use for both the job seeker and the hiring businesses. But from your own business perspective, what are you doing to put in those kind of steps of excellence or greatness within behind the scenes?
Yeah. So people always focus on utilizing your competence, and obviously we are doing that, Stephen. But here's the thing: there's can't prepare for every situation. Yeah, like it's some every business at some stage faces disruption and existential crisis. I've led job boards through periods of competitive disruption, recessions, a pandemic. You know,
Mm.
sometimes you just never know what's around the corner, but that doesn't mean you can't plan for it.
Yeah,
And in regard to that, you'll always be dealing with some element of the known unknown. You just don't know what that is. And what I'm trying to do is build the business around resilience. I think that's essential. And I would suggest that business owners and leaders can do things to prepare for that known unknown. Look, for me, we want to focus on our culture being very agile. And I don't just mean implementing agile practices that promote iterative progress. It's actually about creating a growth mindset in all of your people. Don't just encourage learning, make that thing mandatory. Businesses make so many things mandatory with policies and everything else. Actually, learning should be mandatory, in my opinion. But the business needs to support that by giving them the time and space to do it. Let people move out of the lane, away from their departmental responsibilities. Let them implement those learnings, let them fail, empower them to make decisions. This, for me, develops a business really built on creativity and stronger execution.
yeah,
Um, having a core culture based on learnability will ultimately create a team that is prepared to handle whatever curveball is thrown at them. And it will establish stronger talent density in the business. And I really feel that a small group of highly effective people always trumps a larger single function workforce. And that's one of the key founding principles and how we want to build our business. The other thing that we want to be different on is to be truly customer centric.
mm,
Most businesses when they think about being customer centric, Stephen, they'll automatically the brain will move to customer service or customer success here. But how many customers have customer research teams, or how many, sorry, businesses have customer research teams that focus on how clients' problems are evolving?
mm,
It might be smart to prepare for solving the problems of tomorrow. That's going to keep you always relevant. And, even down to business structures, they're not geared up to be customer centric. How many marketing teams or product teams actually visit with customers? I think
mm.
the business would be able to serve those customers better if they did. And, even simple things like how many companies truly continuously do customer client focus groups where the C-suite attend. You know,
Yeah.
you, for me, you have to make understanding and delivering to the customer a core part of the company's mission, and that's certainly where I'm focused on at the moment.
I really like that. There's a phrase that came from sport. I think it might have been Alex Ferguson, and he spoke about a pre-mortem,
Yeah.
where what they would do is they would look at how can the opposition beat us. So it's not in terms of what do we need to do to win or what do we do to mark them up. It's actually almost looking internally to say where are our weaknesses and where are we exposed, and
Mhm.
then being able to build on that. So that idea of being prepared for the worst, it is a bit of a kind of a whiteboard exercise to say what's the worst case scenario that's going to bring an end to this. As you say, things like the pandemics and whatever else are difficult to predict, if not
Yeah.
impossible. But there will be other elements in terms of what, we've just had a change in government. So again, what could the outcome like from that be, particularly in the care sector? So it's a great idea to have that kind of what if scenario built into your day-to-day actions. And then when you've spoken about giving your team that freedom or the freedom to try things and fail within, the rules of play, if you like. So we always look at when we're working with teams, how do we how do we make them as effective as they can be? We focus on 7 key elements. So strong leadership is essential, having a common goal for them to go after, um, knowing the rules of the game as well as their own
Hmm.
roles and responsibilities is essential in there. But when you've got that framework, then you can allow people to just go and experiment a little bit within the rules of the game as well. But one of the bits or the two sort of last bits of that are continual learning.
Hmm.
So, always trying to be better than you can yesterday. And it's sometimes that's an element of businesses which is missed out on, investing back into their people to get the best from them. And then finally a bit of feedback as well.
Yeah.
Feedback, and you'll see it obviously in that recruitment industry. Feedback can sometimes come too late for a lot of people.
Mhm.
So from that perspective, I think what you've spoken about there is a great idea in terms of being able to establish that team and let them grow as the business grows as well. Where did you get that motivation from or that kind of insight from?
Um, in all honesty, I actually think some of it was through selfishness in all of the businesses that I've been involved with. Actually, having my own reading time was something that was really important to me.
Hmm.
So I think I always try to build a business case on how that could be important and useful for the company, for everybody. I think that was the stemming original idea. But of course, much as um, business thinking today is a lot more profound than what it was 20 odd years ago. So of course there's a lot of study around that. And I just think that business, to some degree rightly, are very focused on hard skills. But the thing with hard skills for me is that they're perishable. You could be an expert on Excel today, but that product's evolving all the time. So those skills are not kept up on 2 years from now, 2 months from now, when those changes are made to that tool, your skill will reduce over time. But when it comes to things like soft factors, their soft skills are very durable. If you're great with people, if you have empathy, if you can build trust, if you're great in creative storytelling and sales, these skills are likely to be retained over time. And I would actually argue that businesses should put more emphasis on them because things like AI coming in, if more of the hard skills, is more of that's going to be done for us in terms of how we create value for businesses and how we differentiate ourselves, uh, will be more dependent, I believe, on those softer skills that you inherently have and build upon.
Yeah, and you reference sort of 20 years ago to now and how that's kind of evolved, and I think it's quite commonly known that that evolution is almost like management into leadership.
Hmm.
Leadership's now a more attractive word to be associated with instead of management. And there's a differentiation between the two. I think there is. For me, it's management's about creating competent and productive people, and managing the processes through that. Whereas leadership, I mean, it's where you lead people, but it's where you enroll and you inspire on that greater mission. And it's getting the balance right within the team. When do you
Hmm.
manage? When do you lead? Or is it two separate functions within the business? Do you have a management level and a leadership level? What's your view on that?
No, I think to be truly effective at what you do today, you need to be competent at both. And the way I look at it in terms of how I differentiate between the two is policeman and pastor.
Yeah.
You have to police things, and that's the management side for me. You know, uh, there's a business KPI there. Are we hitting it? But how you interact with that problem is where the leadership kicks in. How you do something is really where the leadership comes in. And for that, you need to play that pastoral role where, in your office, I think sometimes, and any leader will recognize that as your couch or your seat often becomes um, a therapy session at times, because ultimately you're dealing with people and it's people that build the business. So you need them to be at their best. And sometimes that's dealing with their fears and their challenges, and that's essential. But really, if you if you're a great manager, absolutely that will serve the business so far, but it won't create the most optimum high potential outcome possible, because people need to know where they're going. They need to be inspired, and that's where the leadership part kicks in. But if you're a great leader and a poor manager, you won't have the impact in the business. You won't produce the results. And for me, great partnerships between leaders and the people who work there, you really need to bring some key things. Everybody needs to have impact, and that's why you need that managerial skill set. And as a manager, it's our job to decide who goes on the field and who comes off the field, and we need to use our leadership to make that decision and not delay on it. And yeah, but you need a lot of intimacy as well to deal with the people, of
Yeah.
course. And I'm a big believer in radical candor, and I love to be um, not harsh, but I love to be honest and I love to be direct with people.
Yeah.
And that's great, but I've seen many leaders who are very direct but lack the other essential components to be effective. And the other essential component, if you're going to be very direct with somebody, is I think you need to be great at building trust. And trust is a really complicated thing. And in fact, probably a session where we could do a podcast on nothing but trust. But one of the things I really buy into is that idea of the trust equation and what goes into it. You need to be credible. For people to follow you, you need to know your stuff. Otherwise, you might not be worth following.
Yeah.
But as an individual, you also need to be reliable. Do you do, as a leader, do you do what you say every single time? Do you deliver yourself? You need that reliability. And of course, then you need that degree of intimacy, which I touched on, which is um, do the people you work with feel safe with you? Do they feel safe to confide their fears? Do they feel safe to say that they failed? Do they, that safety factor is so important. And these are all really trust building elements. But of course, those trust elements are eroded by the leader's degree of self orientation. If I'm incredibly self centered, then all those good things deteriorate quite significantly. But if I've actually focused on the interest of others, then there's going to be a lower degree of self orientation, which ultimately means for the individual that they know I've got their best interest at heart. And I think if you've got a strong trust score with people, then they'll appreciate that radical candor, which is another fantastic book. But it's great advice. But I think the deployment of that radical candor often is without trust, and therefore sometimes backfires.
I love the fact you brought up the trust equation.
Right.
It's
Okay.
so
Well,
good.
my background is I did mathematics at university, and I never sat my final exams because I actually had a kid on the way when I was 20. So I'm a failed mathematician. So any opportunity to put in an equation, I try and give it a go. But in fact, I
Yeah,
think the trust equation is created by others, but it sticks in my head for the equation
yeah.
factor. Mhm.
No, I can love and I can connect that logical element that you're coming from with
Mhm.
it, Gavin. It's brilliant. You reminded me when you were talking there of there's loads of really good stories around the England rugby team when they won the 2003 World Cup, and led by Clive Woodward. One of the stories was around leadership, and it was how regard in that within that leadership team, whatever they disagreed on stayed in that room. So
Mhm.
then when they took the field, when they took the training field, they all had the same message. And they all conveyed it the same way. And there was some great stories about, Lawrence Delalio throwing tables around and all this kind of stuff in these meetings. But one of the attributes that they then brought into the team was that they spoke to people about stabbing you in the chest And what it meant was if you were disgruntled or if you weren't happy with somebody's performance or how they were, how they were engaging or the effort they were putting in, rather than going and having a moan about it behind their back, you were to approach the individual face to face, and they opened with that phrase of, "I'm going to stab you in the chest." And it was a way of saying, "This is me being honest about how I
Mm.
feel about you." So it wasn't done to criticize, it was to say, "This is how I feel and the impact it's having on the team." So again, coming back to that level of engagement across the team and being able to have that open communication, it's really, really important. Obviously, from that story, you can see it has the desired effect in terms of getting the results.
And peer feedback can be more potent, more effective, and a bigger catalyst for change than what that can be from coming from the manager or the leader, can't it? So
Yeah.
I never heard that story. It's a fantastic one, but
And
yeah, it is
yeah, yeah.
powerful.
Yeah, I use a lot of sport analogies when we're talking through things. So very good, very good. So, Gavin, I've really enjoyed this. But tell me, for jobs and care, then, what does the next 5 years look like for you?
Great question. I mean, obviously, I still want to be playing a key role, making sure that jobs and care serve its customers well, to the point, hopefully, I'm content with our accomplishment. But like you, I'm a big believer in continuous growth. So maybe content might not be the destination for me, but as from a business, my hope is that by that time, our vision to be supplying post-hire solutions that support retention and workforce management. That's where we hope to be. Right now, we're in the search and match business. We help people find the quality hires that they need to make, and we match them really well to those job opportunities. So we're in the search and match business, but in the future, I'd like to be in the search, match, and manage, which includes those sort of post-hire solutions for sure. But in 5 years, I think we need to go that far in order to fulfill our mission.
That's brilliant. And what you've described to me there is moving from almost a transactional relationship just now to a partnership
Yeah,
with your clients that you're looking to build, which is really commendable.
yeah.
Yeah, very
But
good.
yeah, and to even maybe go a wee bit further and open up a wee bit more, Stephen, that idea about being authentic. I think if jobs and care are going to become a crucial supplier to the social care industry, that we may even have to partner with some of the key players or a lot of the key players in the industry.
Mhm.
And for the businesses, recruitment and retention such vital aspect now and in the future, that actually owning a key part of that supply chain might make sense. So you never know. I think in 5 years' time, we could be client owned to some degree, and that would be beyond the typical partnership that you see today.
And it's an expense that a lot of the times businesses don't calculate is the value of retention.
Mm,
And we all know that there's a cost attached to recruitment between advertising or recruitment fees or even just the internal cost of having that empty seat in the business. But actually, the benefit of longer term retention is sometimes something that's not really calculated by businesses as well. How do you get that message across to your client base and build that partnership?
well, look, I mean, there's numerous different studies that try to estimate these things, but
Are you going to give me a formula for it again? Are you?
no, but I will give a figure, and it's quite easily and comfortably 3 times the value of the annual salary, right?
Wow,
Because the obvious thing is that if you lose somebody, and somebody new comes in, they're not as productive as the departing employee, yeah.
sure.
And of
Yeah.
course, that loss in productivity means something. You've got recruitment costs, you've got everything like that. Those things are very obvious, but what often isn't accounted for is the skill and knowledge drain that brings within the business. Your
Mm.
your your longer employees know how things work. They know how to get things done. They're better advocates, and implementers for your customer base. And if you look at sales departments, ultimately that's where the majority of your relationship with those customers exist. So actually losing a handful of customers can have dramatic impact. So, I would suggest that 3 times the annual salary is the minimum impact that it would have on a business. So retention, in a lot of ways, retention is actually more important to get right than the recruiting of people. But there's a symbiotic relationship, of course, between the two. If you hire the right person first time around, you're more likely to get that enhanced productivity that comes with tenure and get that longevity, of course.
Brilliant. And now you're looking at providing solutions on both sides of that, which is an exciting venture. You mentioned AI earlier in the conversation, and I'll assume that you're using a level of AI within jobs and care at the moment. But how do you see this now really influencing your industry in particular moving forward?
So they say that businesses boil down to 3 things essentially, don't they? Having a great product, making a profit, and AI. Oh, obviously I'm being facetious there, right? Ultimately, like, it's people who build businesses, it's people who create those products, it's people who are smart enough to work out how to make a product while creating value for the customers. I do think AI will have huge impacts in any sector. Recruitment will be no different. But ultimately, I think that AI will augment processes and tasks really, really well. It will create that efficiency. It will speed up various stages of the recruitment process. It will make things more cost effective because, of course, by automating routine tasks, AI can reduce the need for more expensive manual costs. Will it improve the candidate experience? Yeah, I think it will create faster response times. I think it will create a degree of personalization. But it won't do that part better in terms of the candidate experience than what a human could do. I also think that the obvious is it will help create data-driven decisions. AI provides really actionable insights, and that will obviously lead to better informed decision making. But I don't think, and I certainly would never suggest that AI makes decisions within businesses. I mean, I've heard statements before that AI could potentially build businesses for people right from scratch. Hey, I've got an idea. Can you go and build me a business doing X? Yeah, but I believe to some degree that's possible. Right now, I'm skeptical whether they would be great businesses and on their own. And of course, the other big thing is scalability. It's going to be able to do all these things and handle large volumes of applications, making it great for businesses that have really high hiring needs. Of course, that all these things will happen, but implementing AI in talent acquisition, it requires real careful consideration, of the ethical implications, data privacy, algorithmic fairness, because you might be using a piece of software or a technology, but do you really know how it works under the hood? Perhaps not. But look, I'm positive about the impacts of AI when it's used responsibly, and it will be an important ally in jobs and care to create more efficiency and effectiveness for customers in the future, for sure.
So, Gavin, you've now went from that career where you've had lots of experience, lots of insight, and then now went and set up on your own. For somebody else who's thinking about making that same transition, what key bit of advice would you give to them before they start that journey?
For me, when you're starting a business, you've got 2 common challenges that I think every startup business faces is what take your shoulders behind, because when you've got a brand new business, there's nothing on the page and you can build and create anything. And there's a temptation to try and build and create everything. And that's not smart, because your time is your biggest enemy in a startup scenario. So you need to figure out where is the oxygen, what are the critical things that's going to create the most value for your customers, and therefore where you need to spend the majority of your time. And every business should have a criteria. For me, it's simple in that I look at all the opportunities. There's a wealth of opportunities, which market to focus on. I could do this one, I could do that one, but you need a criteria to hone down hone down your efforts and what you're going to get your shoulders behind. And really, what I look at is how would that product or that service or whatever we're going to build and create, how would it create value for customers? Yeah. How will it do that? And then ultimately, businesses don't survive if they don't make a profit. So how is that going to drive bottom line growth? Yeah. And the third thing is you need to differentiate and you need to defend. So what would make that difficult for competitors to replicate? And ultimately, if you can't answer positively to those questions, then you really should think twice about the route that you're going down or the product you're about to develop and create, because you could lose so much time. And the second thing that I think is common for all entrepreneurs and in fact for all business leaders is how do you spin all those plates? I mean, and I get asked this question all the time, what does your typical day look like? Well, I don't like a typical day. I like to have variety in what I do. So I try to create, it helps me spin plates, but it also helps me do and deal with my softer obligations because, as a business, especially um, if you're a one-man band or a very, very small company, there's a lot of things that you need to juggle. So for me, and I can give you insight into how I like to structure my weeks, which is, and I do apologize, I put silly theme names on them so that it's easy to remember. I call it Metrics Monday, and Monday for me is all about focusing on the numbers of the business. Um, you know, what are the key metrics and the KPIs and how we're performing against them. It's important to keep abreast of these things at all times. Tuesday is Talent Tuesday. That's what I like to do most of my one-to-ones. Everyone is always more personable, I think, on a Tuesday compared to where they were on a Monday. And as CEO, I think the number one part of the job is actually about attracting and retaining top talent. So I use that day to engage with people outside the organization as well as inside the organization, hopefully with a view of acquiring the skill set further down the line. Ultimately for a digital business such as ours, to continue to grow, you need to constantly be acquiring great people or great businesses. So that's important. And then I've got Working Wednesday. This is where I try to do most of my directly responsible tasks. That's where I get my work done. I do not do meetings on Wednesday with others unless it's with a client. And as we get towards the end of the week, I've got Thinking Thursday. So in Thinking Thursday is where we hold most of the management meetings. It's where the decision making takes place, but it's also the time where I try to carve out some personal development time for myself. So maybe that's an extended reading period because normally I try to do 15, 20 minutes per day. But on the Thursday, I'll maybe take an hour to maybe take an extended lunch that day, cheekily. And then that leads me nice into Fun Friday. And Fun Friday probably needs a wee bit more explanation than perhaps some of the others because it's not always as fun as it sounds in the sense that it's not just about getting the pizzas in the office. But for me, what it does is it serves me a reminder to get out from my desk, get away from my computer and engage with employees, understand what challenge they're facing, how they're going about solving those problems, and really just participate in the wider organisation. I've never been one that wants to be locked away in an ivory tower. I want to work with the whole organisation. Now, I appreciate from a scalability point of view, that's not always possible, but you can certainly do better rather than do nothing. And certainly getting out and working with people and engaging individuals across the organisation is really what my Friday's all about. Plus, it ends up, I leave the week knowing exactly how we're doing, and also gives me some thoughts about what we need to maybe prioritise better going into the following week.
Do you know, they always say that business owners wear many hats, and I've almost got an image now of you with 5 different hats with Metrics Monday on one of them and Fun Friday on
Yeah.
another. So yeah,
Well,
brilliant.
the thing is, like, I do like that variety. You do have to spin a lot of places, but here's the other truth of it is that the human mind works best when it focuses on one thing at a time.
Yeah,
So to that end, what people try to do is so much variation in the single day that perhaps they just don't do it as well as what they could if they employed the relevant themes for them in their business. Now, people's themes will vary, but at least I know if I'm working even loosely towards those themes, that I'm doing hopefully a lot more of the right things. And the other bit of advice when when we're both talking about these spinning plates, you don't always have to tackle them yourself. In fact, you're better to use the expertise of others. We've touched on it during this
Mhm.
conversation that few human beings are expert at everything, and you've got to use the wealth of knowledge in your team, and you've got to employ people who are better at certain subjects than you are, and ultimately that leads to a really great organization as opposed to what could maybe just be a good one.
So much great advice in there, Gavin. I love that. Time is one of your greatest commodities. So find out what works for you, and manage it accordingly. Um, you mentioned, profits and turnover, and we've always got a saying. It's be impatient for profit, be patient for growth, because that's
Yeah.
going to be the lifeblood of your business there as well. But just finding that environment that works for you as well is going to be key. It's not the same for everybody, and there's lots of models that you can take out there, as I mentioned, time blocking or whatever element it is that you're looking to focus on. But find what works for you, and as you said, get your shoulder behind it.
Yeah,
Great
no, I agree.
insight, really great insight.
Yeah, the motto that I use, which I nicked from the Navy SEALs, is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And look, as business leaders, and I know we want to accomplish things really quickly, but that's the managerial point of view, the leadership point of view. Our job is to sometimes slow things down,
Mm.
slow things down. And I hear this a lot about how it's okay to fail. In fact, I think I've said it in this conversation. It is okay to fail, but look, I'm a pragmatist though. Surely it would be better to win far more often than what you fail. Winning does not stifle creativity for sure. Not experimenting does. So I don't condone not experimenting, and experimental stuff. If it's truly experimental, will have a high failure rate. But ultimately, if you slow things down, your execution is so much stronger and you're far more likely to succeed because, I've not moved businesses a lot, but, maybe three or four moves in my career so far. And, yourself as a new individual, you see things differently. You might put an idea forward. How often do you hear somebody tell you, oh, we tried that and it didn't work? But actually,
Yeah.
when you look under the hood, it's the execution that was the problem. The idea was largely sound in the first place. And as business leaders, that's where you've got to embrace that slow, smooth, smooth as fast.
And I think timing for those kind of opportunities as
Mm.
well. It could be a perfectly good, you know, product, service, or offering that you put out there, or a methodology. But if the timing's not right, it doesn't work. But that doesn't mean that it's a defunct idea.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know.
That's it.
So brilliant. Success comes through failure, not from failure.
Agreed.
It's another way I like at it. So yeah, really good insight, Gavin. I've enjoyed that. Thanks. What a great way to wind up the conversation. Just before we do, if people are interested in finding out a bit more about Jobs and Care or yourself, how do they get in touch? How do they find you?
Well, that's easy. The jobs and care URL is just jobsandcare.com. So it's quite an easy URL to find. But of course, I like engaging with people directly. So if they want to reach out, it's Gavin at jobsandcare.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn or a whole host of other social media. So it's quite easy.
Amazing. Gavin, thanks so much for your insight today and your time. Really enjoyed the conversation, and wish you and Jobs and Care all the best for the future.
No, thank you. Cheers for having me.